Assessments and Education, Dental Hygiene, 425. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Tell me, and I forget. Teach me, and I remember. Involve me, and I learn." I really like this saying. I think it ties in with what we've covered thus far and what instructors should aim for throughout their teaching careers. There are two types of assessment we'll cover in this section. The two types of assessment are formative assessment, which is considered assessment for learning, and summative assessment, which is considered assessment of learning. I believe Paul Black's analogy of the two assessments is a really good analogy. He says, when the cook tastes the soup, that's formative assessment. When the customer tastes the soup, that's summative assessment. When the cook tastes the soup, it's formative assessment because it's being tested during the process of cooking. When the customer tastes the soup, it's a summative assessment because the final product is being delivered to the customer. Formative assessment. Formative assessment is assessment for learning. This is where students are being evaluated during the development of their learning. The focus for formative assessment is on improving their learning process. In this type of assessment, thorough and insightful feedback is important. Think of when you were first in clinic. The instructor evaluated you as you were instrumenting and would give you feedback. The feedback wasn't, "That's incorrect." It probably looked more like, "While your ergonomics are great, I would like to see your hand positioning more," fill in the blank there, and depending on where it's at in the area. Then they would watch you work on their instructions and until your hand positioning was correct. Having been taught the feedback sandwich, I have found it to be very effective. This is where you tell the student that they're doing really well in one area, critique what needs to improve, then find another positive. Students generally respond well to this type of feedback. This is not a test on instrumentation, just an assessment of your learning progress. What is the purpose of formative feedback? The purpose is to continually improve the student's learning while the student is in the process of learning. Another purpose is to involve students in the ongoing assessment of their own achievement. Examples of formative assessment include minute papers, low-risk quizzes, creating a title for the class session, hand in, pass out, doodle it, and metacognition. A couple more that are very basic and helpful are simply having the students raise their hands when they understand and asking questions and waiting for a response from the students. There are many more examples of formative feedback, but these are ones I like to use. Because some of these are probably new to you, let's go over them. Minute paper. This is when the instructor has the students write a paper that summarizes what they learned during the class session. Or it can be what is still unclear to the students at the conclusion of the class session. Low-risk quizzes are utilized either at the beginning of class, the end of class, or both. This is generally very short, maybe 5 questions, that inquire about the main concepts you want your students to take away. When given both at the beginning of class and at the conclusion of class, it can give the instructor an idea of whether the students understood what was being taught. Title for the class session. This is a formative assessment I learned at ADEA, the American Dental Educators Association, meeting. This is where the instructor would give the students an opportunity at the end of class to create a title for the class session. I really like this one because you can see where some students got the concepts and others missed it and focused on one item instead of seeing the general ideas or concepts for the class session. Hand in, pass out. This is where the instructor would have the students anonymously write down answers to questions asked by the instructor. The students would then hand them to the instructor. The papers would be shuffled and passed out to be critiqued by their peers. This is beneficial to the students to critique what they did right and where they need to improve. Doodle it. The students are instructed to diagram or draw what they learn. Metacognition. The student writes down what they did in class, why it was done, how they can apply it, what they learned, and what questions they still have about it. This description by Carol Boston in The Concepts of Formative Assessment I thought was nice and clear. Teachers can build in many opportunities to assess how students are learning, and then use this information to make beneficial changes in instruction. This diagnostic use of assessment to provide feedback to teachers and students over the course instruction is called formative assessment. It stands in contrast to summative assessment, which generally takes place after a period of instruction and requires making a judgment about the learning that has occurred. This is done by grading or scoring a test or paper. Summative assessment. This is the evaluation given at the end of the unit, midterm, or at the end of the course. Summative assessment is done to assess the learning accomplished by the student. Summative assessment also indicates how effectively the instructional strategies or design and information given was retained by the students. The purpose of summative assessment is to measure students' achievement at a point in time for reporting and accountability, to sort students by rank and order, and to maximize student learning through standardized tests such as the dental hygiene boards. Examples of summative assessments. First, they're generally high-stakes exams. So, exams or quizzes that have a high value points or a high percentage of the grade would fall under this category. Therefore, it's logical to say that final exams, entrance exams such as the ACT and SAT, and finally, the dental hygiene board exams all fall under this category. So what is the teacher's role in assessments? With formative assessments, which is the assessment for learning, the teacher's role is to inform the students of goals and objectives, to modify instruction if what they are using is not effective, and involve students in the assessment of the instructor and the course. The teacher's role in summative assessment, which is the assessment of learning, is to follow test administration procedures to use results to help the students reach their goals, and the instructor, school, and the institution schools, and lastly to prepare the students on test-taking skills for their boards. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. The last one, it's to use results to help students reach their goals, the instructor's goals, and the institution's goals, and prepare the students on test-taking skills for their boards. Now let's discuss what the student's role is in assessments. The student's role in formative assessment for learning is to strive to understand the goals and objectives and to assess instructions given to them to improve future sessions and teaching methods. An example of striving to understand these goals and objectives would basically be the student putting the time and effort into their coursework to better understand what is to be learned to achieve the goals and objectives. An example of assess instructions to improve future sessions and teaching methods would be the students giving feedback on what they didn't understand and how the instructor could improve on communicating the information to them. The student's role in summative assessment of learning is to study to meet the standards, to take the tests, to strive for the highest score possible, and avoid failure. This will help them prepare for their boards. Laying this out for the students is extremely helpful when it comes to communication with their students. The students have the most success when expectations are clearly laid out for them. Formative assessment should be designed to aid in retention of the material, and summative assessment should be designed to understand how well the students have retained the material. It is important to note that there are pros and cons to both assessment types. Please read through your designated reading material to answer this week's discussion question on what the pros and cons are of formative and summative assessments. Food for thought. What type of assessment are the discussions? What have been formative assignments in this course? What have been summative assessments in this course? How would you improve this course and its assessments? If you struggle with the two types of assessments, please look up these references to better understand what we have discussed. If you still have questions, please contact your instructor for further clarification. Have a great week.